We'll just feel the dantian. For the mind to settle down here naturally, the posture needs to be really good. So no sense of collapsing. The hips need to be sort of angled back a little bit, like your tail is sticking back a little bit on the chair. So if you're sitting on a chair, you're right on the edge. Your sitting bones are just on the edge. So they say for a man, your testes should actually be off the chair. So that's how far forwards you are. So there's strength in the lower back. The lower back is arching a little bit, and that's bringing the thymus up. It's driving the tail back a little bit. It's driving your sitting bones into the seat of the chair. And then this can just relax, and your mind will find its way down here. We're all getting on a bit now. And so there's three things that become more and more important as we age. Flexibility. So we tend to get stiffer as we get older. So there needs to be some stretching component to the practice that we do each day. And also balance. So as we get older, we tend to lose our balance more frequently. Also, emptiness. So as we get older, we fill more and more with, not just with experiences, but with bad habits. So we become congested. John had a wonderful phrase, clotted with self. So imagine clotted cream, this sort of thick, lumpy cream. So that's what the self is like. So there needs to be these three aspects to our work. Think of it as yoga for the flexibility, Tai Chi for the balance, and meditation for the emptiness. And they're not just qualities of the body, the flexibility and the balance, it's also quality of the mind. Flexible body, but also a flexible mind. A balanced body, but also a balanced mind. Bring it up into prayer posture. Feel all the fingers are trying to straighten and they're all together, so they're touching each other. The middle finger, you can think of that as your spine. So the straighter you make your middle finger, the more erect becomes your spine. Make sure your head is pulled back. And now let's just bring the hands up. Just slowly does it. bring the head back. And then down. Here, you can look down on top of the fingers, and that will tend to get the head in the right position. We tend to have our heads pulled back a bit too much. So they say when you're meditating, your eyes should be looking down about a meter or 1.5 meters in front of you. So we're trying to get the neck to stretch. So you just imagine underneath the lump at the back of the skull here, where the neck comes into the skull, that is being pulled up. Almost like there's a meat hook stuck in there and you're being cranked up from the ceiling. So the spine is lengthening. If your posture is good, then the forces of gravity acting upon you will actually lengthen your spine. It won't crush it. Let's come up again. And just keep on going. So you're trying to get the arms straighter and straighter. And then slowly down. Feel this being pulled up here. If you can get this good here, the back of the head, then it will also adjust your sacrum and your lower back. So this point is the equivalent of the sacrum. Your neck is the equivalent of the lumbar spine. So if you work on one, you'll tend to work indirectly on the other one as well. So let's try one more. Up. And then down. Now let's just try just a few with one hand. So just reaching up. The bell ringer. We're going to reach up. Really stretching from the lower back all the way up into the fingertips and pulling down. So let your head tilt to the side. So you have to get your head out of the way. Feel the line from the sacrum all the way up to the fingers. We'll do a few twists. One hand behind the back. You see the fingers sticking out of the back here. Bring the fingers round. The other hand on the opposite knee. And just gently pull, helping yourself into a twist. Trying to get the twist low down into the lower back. And you just keep it going. Keep the pressure on. And just breathe. And then the other side. So when you're doing these exercises, it's the same for anything really, when you do anything. What's crucial is the quality of your mind. So we want a mind that's just quiet and can just keep the intensity sort of building gently. If you can keep your mind on the job, then something will build up, the energy will build up. And this is why we talk to ourselves, because it's deflating the energy all the time. We don't like energy. We don't like intensity and spirit. So we're always finding ways to alleviate it. And the best way is just to distract yourself somehow. One more this side. And then one more the other side. And then just back to the front. Both hands behind. So it's like we're doing this, we're cupping our elbows, but behind. So that just forces the spine to arch a little bit, like you're thrusting your chest up and pulling your mid back, the part we've been working on with the stick, pulls that in. It's as though your arms sort of disappear. And you can meditate like this. This can be a meditation posture. It's actually quite strong. Remember, Chen Manqing had his great breakthrough when after he had a dream that he was pushing hands, but he had no arms. So he just had to use whole body energy. So here it's as though your arms have been cut off. So where my arms cross my spine, from there down, the spine is driving downwards into the cushion, into the chair, and also into your tail. And from there upwards, the spine is rearing back and thrusting upwards. In meditation, they say there's 3 stages to the training of the mind. So the first they call quiet mind. It's trying to relax and just let it stop talking to itself quite so anxiously. So having the mind focused in a point is useful. But the problem with that is that although the mind is quiet, it's often what they call sunk into a stupor. So we want a mind that is quiet, but also incredibly alert and awake. So that next stage they call empty mind. So the mind is quiet, but it's also empty. So it's like, it's an emptiness that can listen. I have to just drain away, I have to empty out. It's like a purging, a catharsis. So when the empty mind presents itself to the world, it's just naturally filling all the time, but not with itself, but with just the impressions, with the world itself. So when the student presents empty mind, the teaching has no choice but to come out of the teacher, because it's like a vacuum, that their emptiness has sucked the teaching into them. So there's nothing worse than the student for whom you cannot get a word in edgeways. They're always talking about themselves. That just keeps the teaching at bay. There's a stage beyond that, which they call no mind. There's no quality of self-reflection. There's no self. Self has just completely disappeared. And now you're just there right on the edge of things, gazing out into this amazing world. A bit like a wild animal. Like you've lost your humanity almost. And have just become this trembling, charged sense organ. It's like when John asked Dr. Chi, what's the highest level of Tai Chi? And Dr. Chi thought for a moment and he just said nothing. So that's no mind. And then you're just completely responsive. Okay, let's stand now. Moving from leg to leg. Like an animal on the prowl. So rather than being inside, moving from leg to leg with this sense of real containment, you're really prowling around. So some part of you, an alert vigilance, basically your spirit, has to be out there the same way a prowling animal, a hunting animal, or an animal being hunted would have to have its spirit out there, listening. So we're not listening with the ears so much. We're listening with a sort of bristly attentiveness. And for that, what I've found is that your tail has to be really free. So basically, you have to stick your bum out. It's subtle, but there's a sense of something here just being able to come out. We're so used to repressing ourselves. Basically, to survive and flourish in a civilized society, one needs to operate in a state of repression. So we need to pull the bum in and become respectable and polite. Whereas here, we're just sort of, I'm just releasing something here. And then that will bring a fieriness to the top of me. If I can bring this release to the bottom of me, then I'll also get a release in the top of me. This is the thing about the spine. What happens at the bottom will happen at the top. So something like Alexander technique, which is wonderful. So what they do, they work on the top to try and affect the bottom, but it doesn't work. So this is all the Alexander teachers I've encountered, spoke to, say, you know, this is the case. Just because you're working on your chin and your upper chest, it doesn't mean that your tail's going to release. Whereas here, if you can get the tail to release, then you'll become charged and fiery in the upper body as well. So working here will give you no sense of the tail necessarily. The tail is difficult reminds us of our animality. It's dirty, it's close to your arsehole. It's all this, it's this whole area that's problematic, all to do with getting rid of your waste and all to do with sex. So the things we're generally most repressed about, shitting and fucking. And then you can just really keep down. It's no real problem. So this thing of tightening here, becoming tight-arsed, becoming English, basically, it's all to do with this sort of the long, elegant line. So I'm sure it happened when we really stood up straight. So Neanderthal man needed to crouch and squat because he was in this environment that had no vegetation because it was Ice Age. So he had to keep a low profile. Whereas Cro-Magnon man, when he came out of Africa, he had to leave the forest, the jungle, and come into the savannah. So he had to be able to see over the grass because the grass is quite high. And so he was pushing himself up all the time in order to see over, to see into a distance. And Neanderthal man didn't have a distance. It's almost like he was short-sighted. So we want to become more like that. It really is just the release in the tail. Tightening here, pulling your tail in and tightening, that's what enables us to think. If you're thinking to yourself, just observe what's happening around here. You'll find you'll have pulled your bum in, you'd have tucked your tail under. Whereas when you're really open and just really connecting to what's outside you, not in a polite conversational way, but in a real dangerous physical way, then this will be really open. Feel how it feels. You look great because it's really open here. So you just look like you have an engagement with the ground, like a monkey, like an ape. So riding horse. If you're prepared to stick your bum out, then you can get down really low and it's no real problem. And now, very light, like a really minimal jog on the spot, but you're doing it just to loosen things up and become a little bit fey. So lightness. So stay on the front of the foot. Don't let your heels go down. We root in the heels and we allow the lightness by coming off the heels. Feel that two sides of the body doing opposite things. The weaving movement across the body like this. It is very much like sewing, like weaving a line. just allowing that weaving action, that sort of zigzag, to come into the mind as well. So the mind's never really settling on anything. It's slipping this way, then that way, then this way, then that way. And walking is just great for that. If you can walk and somehow just keep your mind with the activity rather than thinking about something else, then that walking action will just come into the mind and really cleanse it and renaturalize it. Because thinking is a very unnatural use of the mind, really. We've had to really force ourselves into some state which is just not ultimately very good for us. Think of the knees. Think of your knees being flighty. They're wanting to go out and up. Keep that sense of the tail extending. As soon as I start thinking, I produced a loop up here, basically, if I want to think. So that would require me to produce a loop down here as well. And that's what we're trying to break. We're trying to connect to the ground. For that, I need to let my tail down and I need to feel the ground. Same way that when I start thinking to myself here, I've lost the world. You know, anything could have happened. And the more active and the more intense I become, same thing really, activity, intensity, the more my spine will tend to a horizontal, the more I will become like the wild animal. So I have to fold here. And that will release my tail. When you get it, it very much feels like there's nothing between you and the world. Let's just try it against the wall. I'll do it just slightly away from the wall. We're not going to touch the wall. So just one foot in front of the other. Have this foot pointing out towards that wall a little bit. So I'm trying to get this part of my spine vertical, but I'm allowing this part of my spine just to extend down my back leg. So my spine is really arching. Very much a sense that my back leg is pushing me forwards, but my front leg is having to push me back so that I don't fall forwards. So the activity, in a sense, is in the back leg, but my front leg is like a prop that's stopping me coming too far forwards. Now you've got your bum in. Let your bum out. Straighten your back leg. You know, in yoga, they actually have straps, and they put a strap underneath this thigh and then pull it up so it really straightens that back leg. And just let your spine here, that's it, go down into the back leg. So you want to really sort of lean like this, like Yung Cheng Fu when he's in one of his sort of single whips or whatever. And so what we then do is keep this like that and just come up from the chest. So my chest rears up. And then the other way. That's it. That looks great. It looks dynamic. Feels very alive, very trembly, shaky, but also dangerous. So you have to be extra careful with your balance. Because when you get into these spirited states, it's like anything can happen. So we're just letting go of that sort of protective self-concern and just entering real spirit. And it's difficult, and it's also dangerous, but it's also exciting. So it has its rewards. Especially afterwards, you feel, wow, I've really done something. I've really gone somewhere. And then back up. Moving backwards and forwards. Remember, this is bow and arrow posture. And so what bow and arrow posture is really is one foot in front and the hips trying to remain square. What we tend to do like a glorified riding horse. So we tend to be moving like this, which is basically riding horse. So I want to make sure this is square. So when I come forwards, I'm basically coming into that posture that we we're just in. I'm really having to straighten the back leg to push this hip round. And then when I go back, This is in a sense even more difficult. I have to really straighten the front leg because I don't want to go back into the back foot like this. I don't want to turn into it. I want to drive into it from here. So this has to push back and fold. So this is the point where my tail, again, is just extending down the back leg. So it's like the back foot equivalent of what we've just been doing. And then I want to push forwards here. So this has to drive forwards, this hip, by straightening the back leg. And then I have to make sure that I do get into the back leg and keep square. So this really has to push here. So it's almost like I could just fold like this. So this is basically just repulse monkey. Let this straightening of the front leg tilt you forward slightly so that this tail is really finding the back heel. I'll do it this way around so you can see the spine. So when I come forwards, this is trying to hit the back leg. And then when I go back, I have to really press here, which gets me leaning like this. So if I'm thinking to myself, and remember, thinking to yourself is not just rabbiting on in your own mind. It's any sense of sort of consideration or self-concern. So that's what we're trying to just burn out. And you only really do that with intensity of spirit. So something in me surging forwards. And to get that ferocity coming out of my upper body without it losing my balance, I have to get the same thing going down here. Where it's completely different from the way we normally work. And then let's try with the other foot forwards. And you can do this quite mildly. To de-intensify it a little bit, you just have the feet closer together. Still want this feeling that I'm going into the back leg. So imagine when you're in the back leg, you're having to support someone. Someone is leaning on me. So their weight is coming into me. So if I have to support them without them knocking me off balance like this, I have to lean forwards a little bit just to drain their weight down into my leg. This is the back foot. You have to lean forwards when you're in the back foot, otherwise you'll lose your balance. And then when you're in the front foot, you just have to be careful not to lean too much. Because when I'm in the front foot, the visualization is that someone is pulling my hand, or I'm supporting their body. Their body is leaning in that direction. I'm just holding them. And I don't want them to fall. So I need to be able to anchor into my front foot. If I lean too much, then I'll just topple over it like this. When you're in the back leg, the leg is like a prop. And when you're in the front leg, it's like an anchor. And the best way to feel all this is to work with another person. If you're working with another person's body weight. So here, in my classes, you're actually supporting a real body. Someone is just leaning into you, trying to be so heavy that you're driven back. And now just stepping. I want to put the foot down. I've got this sense that we've been working on of this loop going around the foot. But even that is considered. So, you have an image, you're being careful, and you're creating this design. It's like the image of the graphic designer, how sort of everything's in its right place, everything's tidy. These beautiful lines, this beautiful design that you just feel like splashing with paint or shitting on or something, because it's just so without any real sort of passion. What we want now is just to come into the leg by folding from here. So I'm really coming down into the leg and lifting this one. So I forget about that design. It can be there. It will be there because we've worked on it. So all these things we work on are there in our energy. But now I just want this real sense of like I'm biting something. I'm really ravenously hungry, and I just take that chicken leg and just, and so that's the sense here. This leg, it just bites the ground, and this other leg comes up. That's it. That looks great. And so it just looks like you're in the ground rather than on the ground. And then this one, it's like I just pull. And the important thing is the fold here. And that fold will get your tail sticking out a little bit and extending. So it's a very different mind. It's the mind of the hungry hunting animal. So it's very difficult, this way of working. It doesn't just go against our training, our Tai Chi training, for which getting the bum in is really the first thing. It goes against our bourgeois training as well, the training of civilization. So normally if I'd go into riding a horse, the first thing I would do is pull here. I'd get my sacrum to drop and have a sense of containment here, and a sense of holding myself in and holding myself back. So a real sense of distance between me and the other person. Now we just want to just let go here. So there's a sense now that I'm coming forwards into my posture, tumbling almost onto the other person, and tumbling out of myself. I'm not this held back observer that's daintily moving around at its own pleasure and its own whim. I'm this animal that's just coming out of itself. It moves by emerging, like the butterfly coming out of the chrysalis. Imagine, you'd have to really squeeze to get through that shell. So this is why we need that intensity. The intensity will burn the shell away a little bit, but it will also mean that you come into the world correctly. You don't just barge into it like this ignorant bull in a china shop. You're coming with real intensity, but with real carefulness. If you put a foot wrong, you're liable to get eaten. or killed. Okay, let's just bring it back now to attention. This is the challenge now, to maintain an element of that whilst we've got the legs much straighter and closer together. So just keep that single weighted aspect. So the subtle turns and the subtle movement from leg to leg, like you're doing this in your mind. You're playing, the two sides of your body are playing. Always think of a tiger prowling really gently and really slowly. So very much not like a dog. So dogs tend to sort of rush into things. You know, they've got this bumptious energy. Whereas cats, especially the big cats, are just, they have mind continuous. Dogs don't. But the beauty of a dog is its loyalty, really. They say, don't they, that you've never experienced unconditional love until you've owned a dog. Whereas cats are just sensitive and soft.